guys, welcome back. Today we are going to continue talking about the Death Guard, and we're going to start with the Wages of Heresy. When Mortarion joined Horus's rebellion and swore himself to the service of the Dark Gods, he had no idea of the terrible price that he and his sons would pay. The once proud legion was overcome by a uniquely grotesque and tragically fitting damnation, driven into Nurgle's suppurating embrace by a pestilence that even they could not withstand. Mortarion took command of his new army with proprietorial severity. Though he was cold and aloof towards his sons, they worshipped him unquestioningly and followed his teachings to the letter. Mortarion saw in them an opportunity to continue his labors upon Barbarous. He would forge the Death Guard into perfect infantrymen, adaptable and self-reliant warriors who specialized in the use of durable weaponry that was easily maintained and resupplied. The Death Guard were taught to choose the best ground, and then to grind their enemies down upon it with massed infantry formations. They were the anvil to their allies' hammers, or else the bludgeon that battered the foe into submission. Some amongst Mortarion's brothers disparaged his tactics as blunt and unimaginative. In truth, the doctrines of the Death Guard were durable and efficient, and demonstrated a remarkable talent for grassroots martial organization that earned the Death Guard a truly impressive honor roll of victories during the Great Crusade. Mortarion's gene seed made his sons hardy, though his swiftly imposed regimens of toxin hardening and extreme environmental tempering, the former Dusk Raiders became even more durable than ever. This inherent toughness only increased, for Mortarion recruited the bulk of his new legionaries from Barbarous. The Death Guard were rightly proud of their indomitable physiology. They deployed into the most hazardous war zones where even other space marines hesitated to tread, and made widespread use of rad and phosphex weaponry. Alongside prescribed viral agents that soon earned them something of a dark reputation amongst their brothers. Mortarion cared not for the distaste of his peers. His personal mission was the overthrowing of tyrants, being such as the Carrion lords of Barbarous, and he took pride that his sons could employ their own rugged strength to defend those too weak to protect themselves. Still, for all their achievements, the labors of the Death Guard went largely unrecognized. Mortarion was far closer to his brother Horus than to his sire, the Emperor, believing that the former recognized his worth far better than the latter ever would. Worse, the longer they fought to shield the weak from oppression, the more the Death Guard became overly enamored of their own fortitude and dismissive of those too weak to protect themselves. When the Horus heresy tore the Imperium in two, Mortarion was amongst the first to throw in his lot with the War Master. In Horus's name, the Death Guard cut a swath through their former brothers from Istvan III to Terra itself. Yet along the way, a hideous curse overcame them. These curs think to hide amidst the clouds of irradiated gases they have unleashed. They believe that because they are too weak of body and mind to endure such conditions, that we too must share their frailty, and shall be turned aside by the desolation they have wrought. They think that the surface of this poisoned planet will kill us just as it would them. Brothers, let us disabuse them of this notion. Captain Ignatus Grolgor, the Dologor Address. It was during Horus's final advance towards Terra that the Death Guard fleet was becalmed in an impenetrable warp storm, its ships reduced to drifting through the immaterium. While they were stilled, the destroyer came. For Mortarion and his Death Guard, there was nothing so terrifying as a plague that made their legendary resilience meaningless. Pestilence, contagion, toxin, and pollution, was no environment so hostile that the Death Guard could not overcome it, until the destroyer plague rolled through their fleet. It roiled in their guts, bloating and distending their once superhuman bodies, transforming them into horrible, pustulant grotesques. They were made corrupt within and sickening to behold without. They grew ever more ill, yet they could not die, their own constitution becoming their worst enemy. What they endured was unimaginable, and none suffered worse than Mortarion. Whether he perceived in those terrible hours the loss of what he had once stood for, and the damnation he had wrought upon himself and his legion, only Mortarion will ever know. Unable to endure any longer, Mortarion offered his soul and those of all his sons to the Immaterium, in exchange for deliverance. A presence answered, as though it had been waiting all along. In the depths of the warp, the great god Nurgle, Lord of Decay and Father of Disease, claimed the Death Guard for his own. What emerged from the warp when the Death Guard fleet reached Terra bore little resemblance to that which had entered. The gleaming white and gray armor of the former Imperial champions was no more, burst and shattered from the horrific bloating of infected bodies, and scabbed with boils, putrescence, and the filth of corruption. Their weapons and war machines were now powered by the sickly sorcery of chaos, glowing with baleful green luminescence and oozing pus. The last betrayed echoes of the Dusk Raiders were gone forever. In their place stood the Death Guard, feet planted unrepentantly amidst the suppurating filth that lay at the end of their path to damnation. They had become plague marines, putrid travesties of their former selves that seethed with the hideous blessings of Grandfather Nurgle. Some of Mortarion's sons embraced their new form, believing in their arrogance that they had passed through the eye of the needle, and proved themselves the only mortals worthy of Nurgle's patronage. Others hated the plague that had laid them so low, the weakness it implied. For these warriors nothing would suffice but to spread ruin and sickness until the entire galaxy was brought down to their level. Others still were driven quite mad, taking on aspects of rambunctious glee or morose entropic misery. Whatever the case, the Death Guard had become Nurgle's servants, body and soul, forevermore. In the millennia of war that followed, their devotion to their rancid deity would only deepen further. Of sorcery and treachery. During his years on Barbarous, Mortarion learned to hate psychers. The Carrion Lords used such power to animate their macabre puppet armies, and even after the Primarch harbored, and ever after, the Primarch harbored mistrust for any who exhibited such abilities. His was the loudest and most incessant voice in condemning the librarious division within the legions of Astartes, and it was Mortarion's remorseless vitriol that turned the ill-fated Council of Nicaea from a trial into a witch hunt. Though Mortarion forbade librarians within his legion's ranks, he could not do without psychers entirely. To him, navigators, astropaths, and their ilk were a necessary evil, one he sought to rationalize through his obsession with arcane pseudoscience. Nor could Mortarion prevent the recruitment of latent psychers into the ranks of the Death Guard, instead insisting that all such legionaries stifle their abilities upon pain of disgrace and exile. One such individual was Callus Typhon, the captain of Mortarion's first company and one of his most trusted warriors. Typhon wholeheartedly embraced the Davenite warrior lodges that spread through the Death Guard, and the worship of dark gods they brought with them. Moreover, when the Destroyer Plague finished its hideous work, it was into his body that it poured, empowering him as a favored champion of Nurgle. Typhus, host of the Destroyer Hive. Was this mere coincidence, or was it a reward for a betrayal well executed, and a final liberation from Mortarion's crushing edicts? In the wake of the Legion's hideous transformation, it no longer seemed to matter, for none remained sane enough to care. The Plague Planet. When Horus's rebellion collapsed, the Death Guard fell back to the Eye of Terror in good order, reaving as they went. There, Mortarion earned his ultimate reward from Nurgle, demonhood, and a world to shape and rule as he saw fit. The Plague Planet is a dark reflection of an already shadowed world. It is barbarous remade in yet more hideous hues. A fume-wreathed nether hell where disease runs rampant and barbarian tribes cling to a nightmarish existence amidst rotting forests and swamps. Worm-eaten mountains rise to pierce the churning skies, their flanks roamed by plague-ridden abominations that should be dead, yet still prey on human flesh. Higher, atop the peaks, the Death Guard maintain their fortresses as once the carrion lords of Barbarous ruled from on high, reveling in the bitter irony that they have become the very despots they once fought to depose. The clouds of contagion that wreathe these slab-sided rusting fastnesses are inimical to life. None but the Death Guard can endure even a single breath of them, quite besides the brutish batteries of orbital guns that stud every single mountaintop of this world. Its vapors alone have proved enough to massacre invading armies on more than one occasion. The Plague Planet is replete with hideous spectacles and places of fetid power. Amongst the suppurating valleys rise tri-lobed platforms of rusted iron, upon which tribal champions battle for the right to join the Death Guard's ranks. Hanging in orbit are chained rings of biomechanical defense platforms and suppurating orbital docks, at which the plague fleets suckle like flies on a carcass. Shrines to Nurgle, crawling molluscoid fortresses, smog-spewing plague factories, and crackling alchemical shield generators dot the planet's surface. Greatest of all, though, are the 7 mountaintop keeps of the Plague Companies, one company ruling over each in their own uniquely revolting fashions. The greatest of these, known as the Black Manse, stretches between the 3 highest peaks of the Plague Planet and serves as Mortarion's personal keep. The dungeons and laboratories of this nightmarish fastness conceal horrors of the very darkest kind. The Plague Fleets. Just as the Death Guard have retained cohesion better than many traitor legions, so they also maintain much larger and more organized fleets of spacecraft. These Plague Fleets comprise ancient Heresy-era battleships, stolen Imperial warships, and even space hulks gathered from the tides of the warp. It falls to the warriors of the 6th Plague Company, the Ferrymen, to master and garrison these craft, and to liberate new ships that may be added to the Death Guard's rotting armada. The Plague Fleets are vital to Mortarion's sons, for they are the vector by which the Death Guard spread Nurgle's blessings to the wider galaxy. Embarking onto these craft, the Plague Companies ride the tides of the warp like wind-blown contagion, emerging into real space whenever Nurgle wills. While their craft plow through the immaterium, they fill up with thick clouds of revolting, fat-bodied plague flies that hatch from walls and bulkheads. When the Death Guard land upon enemy worlds or board their victims' spacecraft, these seething fly storms come with them, spreading infection wherever they go. Should the ships of the Plague Fleet be lost or abandoned, they eventually find their way back to the Plague Planet as drifting derelicts to be crewed again. Some believe this is the will of Nurgle. Others claim that once a ship joins the Plague Fleet, its corrupted machine's spirit is cursed to obey Mortarion until the very end of time. And I think, for now, that is where we are going to call this video. There's still more to talk about, actually, quite a bit, because the way that the codexes are organized relative to the army books, there's a lot of information about the troops, which is pretty cool. So we can go through all that. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.